Well, my vegan story started out actually, I became vegetarian first. And that was the age of 23. I had graduated, after graduating college, I moved out west to California. I was married at the time and just kind of settling into that life where I'm making dinner every night and going with the typical American meals, which would consist of like a meat product and like a starch or a carb and then vegetable. So I just, in preparing these raw meats, it just really started to disgust me. And after time, I started thinking about what it was I was handling. This was another being's flesh, and I thought it was disgusting and it just wasn't right. So finally, in 2001, on New Year's Day, I decided I would never eat meat again, and I never did. So at the time, I didn't know any other vegetarians, just kind of doing it on my own. And it wasn't until a few years later, in 2005, I read the book Skinny Bitch. And they go into, I had never really learned about or heard about any of the animal rights issues that go along with being vegan. But just in reading that book, and there was a particular chapter about how these animals are treated.
The
And
reality.
yeah, and also even just what they had to say about dairy in general, which is so very obvious, but you just don't, you're never brought up to realize like this is really stupid that we're the only mammal that drinks another mammal's milk and the only other animal that drinks milk past infancy.
Yeah, it's kind of odd, really, isn't it?
Yeah. And so that just all clicked and made sense. And, especially then reading about how animals are treated, I was just like, all right, I'm done. I'm vegan now. And it was never, neither of going vegetarian or vegan was not like an easing into process. It was just immediate.
Okay, cool. And you mentioned to me before when we had a chat about Brendan Brazier's influence on you as well.
Yeah, because I started running before, like right before I became vegetarian. So then turning vegan again, I didn't know any other vegans at the time, and Brendan Brazier's books were really kind of what guided me in terms of doing it, in a healthy way as a vegan athlete. And he kind of just showed me how you can thrive and be successful as a vegan athlete.
And what were the books so we can like let other people know?
The Brendan Brazier books, I think his first one was Thrive. They're all, he has like a bunch of different books and they're all titled Thrive. They just have different subtitles. Like he has some specifically about training, specifically for recipes.
So essentially, yeah, just look if people Google Brendan Brazier's name and Thrive books.
Yes.
It'll come up with a list of them. Cool.
Yeah, I think he has like four of them now.
Okay, cool.
So they're
Interesting.
very helpful resources. And he was definitely my inspiration.
Vegan journey. This is quite a complex journey that did actually start with it was food poisoning and I think it was from Cumberland sausage when I was in on holiday in the Lake District, and I was quite ill for about a week or so after that, and it started me thinking about eating meat, and I'd say I've been a very gradual journey to veganism, apart from the last stage that I'll touch on in a bit. And yeah, it was so I started taking meat out of my diet and then just eating fish and veg, which then I slowly transitioned, and that's what I'd recommend to anybody that's looking to adopt a vegan diet and a vegan lifestyle. Is for me, it was a very staged approach, and I think by that way, you don't put too much pressure on on yourself, and you don't put pressure on yourself to not succeed in it. So I was vegetarian then for quite a few years, and I thought, yeah, great, I'm doing the right thing here. And also that it started sparking off my thoughts about animal rights. And I thought, I'm a vegetarian, I'm not causing any harm to animals by doing that. And then at the start of 2013, in February, I went to a film screening from the local vegan group, a group called Exeter Friends for Animals, and they did a film screening at Exeter University, The Peaceable Kingdom. And it's quite an old film now, but it was around predominantly the dairy industry. So I went there as, how can I put it, a leather shoe wearing vegetarian, and thinking, oh, I'm doing a great job here. You know, I'm saving so many animals. You know, really on the right path of animal rights. And I saw this film, and it just it made me sad. It horrified me what went on in the dairy industry.
Yeah.
So that was it. That was an overnight decision to go vegan, and that was approaching 8 years ago now. So yeah, that was it, literally overnight. And I thought to myself, well, you know, I live in Exeter and in the West Country, and it is a big farming community down here. I travel all around the country for business. Let's give it a shot. And a week turned into a month, turned into a year, and it's turned into 8 years of being vegan. So yeah, that was my journey. And I think that the one trigger point, I think for me, was definitely the film. And I think you don't become more vegan, but you become more conscious of your choices. So you start eating vegan, but then when you're mixing and socialising with other vegans, you start drinking vegan. Because of the questions and the conversations that having. We were in a pub in Exeter, and somebody said, "Is that a vegan real ale, or is that vegan lager?" And I said, "I'd never thought about that." So, but again,
it's learning, isn't it? It's a gradual learning process. You kind of, you know, there's things like white sugar that have got, you know, bone charring and stuff like that, and so it's not to take anything away from anyone's journey, because it's part of the process.
Yes, yeah, that's right. And it is very much a learning process, and all the groups and activism I'm involved in, really, for me, I think, as you introduced me as a vegan educator, I like to think of myself as helping people. And I think there's a certain approach. If you help people to achieve something, they're far more likely to achieve it.
My vegan journey is actually really important, I think, for many people that are actually thinking about becoming vegan. I've always loved animals. Ever since I was young, I would have books, loads of stuffed teddies. I was obsessed. And then when I was about 10, I produced multiple projects about whales and dolphins. I was completely obsessed with them, and I wanted to be a marine biologist. So I always had this very deep love of the animal kingdom. And then teenage years hit, and I turned into a stroppy teenager, so all that kind of went out the window. But I still loved animals. I always had that love there. And then I knew a few vegans, and two in particular were very close to me, and they obviously saw that hypocrisy in a way, the fact that I loved animals but I was still eating them, and they were kind of trying to prompt me now and again. And then they finally got me to watch Earthlings with Forks Over Knives. Now, bearing in mind, I couldn't even watch nature documentaries with the sort of predator-prey dynamic. I just couldn't even go anywhere near that because it would traumatize me. So watching Earthlings just was a whole nother level of trauma. And I went vegan overnight, and it was quite interesting because I was vegan for about 8 months, and then I went back to eating chicken, fish, and dairy products, and which is very odd when I think of that now, because I often think, well, how did I go back? How did I go back to eating animals? And I could make all the excuses under the sun and say, well, I was having a really bad time. But when I think about those 8 months of being vegan, yes, I was a strict vegan, but I probably wasn't as connected, and I hadn't gone through an awakening as such. It was almost like, okay, I was traumatized and I instantly made a decision to go vegan, and I didn't really do anything other than change my diet and obviously not use animal products. But then when I went back to eating animals, it was really odd, because for about another year or two, I kind of just suppressed it and put it in a place somewhere. And then for some reason, I just started, I don't know what triggered it, but I just started thinking about animals all the time. I went vegan again, but it was different this time. It was completely different because I had this really dark period of my life. I was in a very horrible place, and I mean, I'll be honest with you, I didn't want to be here anymore because of what was happening to animals, because I couldn't cope with it. And it's almost like I was completely, whatever had been blinding me before was completely lifted, and going vegan wasn't enough for me. I just couldn't cope with existing. I felt like I owed my life to animals. And I still do. I still feel that way. So going vegan and then going into activism was an awakening for me, and it was a process. And I started learning, I started researching, I started advocating, outreach, and yeah, I almost feel like I wasn't who I am today before veganism, who I was supposed to be. I wasn't me prior to being vegan, and I feel like now I am who I am supposed to be. And I feel like my purpose is to advocate for animals in lots of different ways. So yeah, that's my vegan journey. But I think it's so important because of conditioning is just really hard to unravel, isn't it? And if you think about anyone that knows me now, they know I would never go back to eating animals, but I did then. And I think it's just that conditioning is just so powerful, and the way it's unraveled is different for everyone, and the process is different for everyone. Some people go vegan like that and they don't ever go back. Some people it takes a lot longer, you know. But yeah, like I said, it's definitely, it's who I am.
No, that's awesome. And it kind of, from my perspective, there's two things that have jumped out, and that is the power of conditioning and how invisible it is. We live in the UK where people treat dogs and pigs differently, but that's not on a biological level, that's on a conditioning level. But we don't, what I'm trying to say is that there's invisible conditioning all around us, and it takes us as human beings a while to break out of that. And the thing, what I connect with you when you're talking is that veganism just makes a lot of sense. It, like, to not hurt others, that for me, that's my like default way of living, and that kind of comes across from you as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely. I don't view animals as inferior in any way, shape or form. I mean, even when it comes to things like, if some people don't like their dog on the sofa or the bed, and I get why, but for me, I'm like, I don't want him to feel like I view him
separate.
any different. No, he's an equal, and I view every single animal, every life form out there really is equal, and we all have different roles and different purposes and what have you, but why should some forms be more important than others? And I just, that's just how I feel, and that's how I try to live my life now in every way.
Awesome. And veganism's allowed you to make that connection with your positive life.
Yeah, veganism was, it's the birth of so many different things for me. It opened so many doors, and yeah, it's part of something so much bigger, I think, is what I was trying to say before. It's massive, isn't it? It's not just about what people see on the surface of what veganism is. There's so much more to it. There's so many different levels of who you are as a person, and veganism, it almost, for me, it sort of dredged that up. So I've got so much to be thankful for, because I'm so happy.
I've always been an animal lover and always loved animals, always been very sort of protective of animals, and I did used to get challenged by people, but you eat them. I was like, it's different, it's a different thing, and it wasn't really a topic I wanted to engage in particularly, so I didn't effectively, but I was always very, very into health. I did eat a lot of plants. I knew that eating vegetables was very good for you. I knew that we shouldn't be eating too much sugar, all of this kind of stuff. So I sort of was a little bit on that plant health journey as well, and was sort of eating more of that stuff. But in terms of being vegan, that certainly wasn't there. And I went to India And I didn't eat meat purely, I'll be completely honest, it's purely because I didn't want to get sick. I was like, I don't want to get sick. If I eat meat, I'm going to get sick.
It's like lowering your chances of getting sick, almost. Like,
pretty much. I was like, well, you know, everyone goes, you know, apparently everyone goes to India and eats meat and gets sick. I don't want to do that. And I, at first, was pretty annoyed. I was like, well, look, this is annoying. I want meat. I always thought I can't be full of vegetarian food. If I'm honest, I knew what a vegan was, but I was a bit like, I don't really get it. Like, why would, you know, I get not eating meat and fish, but I don't really get the other stuff. Doesn't make sense.
Bit extreme, maybe? Like,
bit extreme, bit kind of like, you're just that annoying person who can't have that. You know, it was a bit like I didn't understand. And I didn't back then. This was 9 years ago. So there weren't many, to be honest, there weren't many vegans around. It wasn't really talked about. I really did not know. To be honest, I didn't know any vegans. I knew vegetarians, but I knew what a vegan was and was like, well, that doesn't make massive sense, but like, fine, cool. And when I was in India, I was getting a bit annoyed, a bit arsey, like, I want to have some meat, but I won't because I'm going to get ill. And I realised I could be really full of lentils, and this was also a really important part of what I do now, and an understanding that I also got of why people are terrified of going vegan or going plant-based or even vegetarian, because I thought by even going vegetarian, I was like, yeah, but I won't know what to eat. I'm not going to be full and it's going to be horrendous. And it's better just to not even engage with the messages. That's easier. Thank you very much. Leave me alone. And when I realized I could be full of lentils, and obviously India's got the most incredible food you could possibly imagine. Yeah, it's the best place to sort of discover that. And yeah, it was vegetarian. I went there, and I also had this thought when I was sitting on a train going, oh, when I get home, I'm going to eat jerk chicken and all these things because I'm not eating it here. And then I had this thought. I was like, you're in this like most amazing place in the world and you can't wait to get back to like smelly London to eat some chicken. Like, go and check yourself, please. This is ridiculous.
It's like a reality check. Like yeah.
Exactly. And then I also just thought, well, you're really enjoying this food, you can be really full. And then I literally remember the place I was sitting on this train, where I was, and I remember saying to myself, all right, I'm going to look up this whole vegetarianism thing when I get home. Vegetarianism, the word vegan was not even there in my head. And I didn't even meet any vegans in India. I met other travelers who were like vegetarian. And then when I got home, I cannot even tell you what I put into Google. I do not even know what I put into Google, but I put something into Google because I said I'm going to look this stuff up. And I'll be honest, my whole world turned on its head. And I was like, oh my God, this has been happening. These animals have all been being killed. I thought, and what I was most angry about as a vegan, well, I wasn't vegan then, was this kind of like, I've been lied to. I've been lied to, actually. Like, I thought those cows were happy. You told me they were happy. You told me the chickens were happy. Like, you know, you lied to me.
The stories that we took on as like, oh, this is, people are telling us that they're having happy lives, and those kind of like myths, basically.
Exactly. And also the myths. And so being a vegan is about not being speciesist. So that is right. Okay, I don't put one species above another. So I don't say, right, you know, I'm going to cuddle that cat but kill that cow. But I extend that completely, and I believe we all should, to humans. What also made me angry was the lies we were being told about our health. You know, not only was this lies, okay, so eat, you know, lots of meat for protein. Yeah, meat does have protein in. But
and calcium.
Sorry?
Milk for calcium and
exactly all of that kind of stuff. And you know, if you don't, then you're going to get really sick and die. And those lies really upset me, because actually eating these products is causing huge amounts of, you know, preventable diseases, you know, heart disease, type 2 diabetes,
obesity,
you know, all of these sorts of things. And people are still being told to eat like this. Even, I mean, there's a great picture that's somewhere, I'll send you, it's probably all over my social media, of what I looked like before I was vegan as well. And when, you know, just even the lies of like a doctor giving me steroid cream for my acne. Like, look at my face right now. I do not have one bit of makeup on my face, right? And not being told, actually, you need to look at what's in your diet. No, I'm going to give you this steroid cream that's going to thin your skin and make you even more dependent on a drug to have the skin you want, when actually, you know, you could just cut out XYZ and put in XYZ. And so there were all these lies going around, and I did get very, at the time, well, I gotta tell everyone. You gotta tell everyone. I mean, they'll want to know this. They'll all want to know this too.
Yeah.
That wasn't quite the case.
Sadly not.
As you can imagine. And I did start off doing, you know, I've always been into, I know I'm going a lot into my story, and you can tell me to stop if you want.
It's all good.
I've always been really into tasty food. And food has always been the biggest pleasure for me. I stopped drinking when I was 21 for lots of reasons. But to be honest, alcohol the taste never really did it for me. I love food. I love indulgence. It's part of culture. It's part of sharing. It's beautiful. So what then really became one of my big missions was, okay, I don't want anyone to ever not choose the vegan option because the vegan option is bad, right? Or I don't want anyone to ever not cook vegan or plant-based because the food's going to be bland, not fill you up. And, you know, I've done a lot of research on health. You know, I studied biological anthropology at Cambridge, and that's only the start of my learning, if you know what I mean. I learned after. And it sent me on this journey, because I understood this, like, okay, the reason I didn't want to engage with any messages or even just eat more plant-based food was because I was like, well, I am going to be full if I won't be full if I'm even going to have a vegetarian meal. So I was like, right, how?
So were you like writing it off before you'd even eaten it?
Yeah. So before I went vegan, that was literally, you know, if I went to a friend's who was vegetarian, I was like, oh. Like, I'm not going to be full at their house. But the truth was, as well, I'll be honest, is some of them didn't know how to create a balanced meal.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Yeah.
And this is the thing, is so when people do say to me, look, I tried to go plant-based or I tried to go vegan and I was hungry, I'm like, yeah, I believe you.
I've been vegan now since just around the time I turned 26, so 10 years, just over. So it's March 2011. The first vegan I met, the first time I even heard veganism, was from a girl called Sally, who I met up with in Bristol. I had no idea what veganism was at this point. I was vegetarian, but I didn't really call myself vegetarian. I just didn't want to eat animals. It was that as simple as me. I didn't really go around. I didn't think a great deal into it, really. I just didn't want to eat animals. It was that sort of straightforward. But I probably, looking back, obviously did eat things with beef gelatin in and all these.
Okay.
But, you know, I wasn't like checking labels. It's just my logic went as far as I don't want to eat meat.
Were you a vegetarian? Would you label yourself as a vegetarian at the time? I didn't label myself as anything.
I just didn't want to eat meat. It was that straightforward. And for me, my thinking at the time, and I was always into the music. I was into sort of the ideals of, I don't know what you call peace and love and kindness and all this sort of approach to life. But I didn't know what veganism was, so it didn't really make the connection that it's all well and good saying peace and love and all these sort of things without then applying it to all areas of your life. So
sort of being a bit narrow-minded with it almost.
Yeah, you just thought not wanting people to bomb each other was enough, and not eating meat was enough. But when there's a much wider picture to it all. But yeah, I met this girl Sally in Bristol. She didn't really say much about that veganism. She just mentioned she just was vegan, and it came up, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. It didn't really go on too much, but I guess it was a seed planted.
Yeah.
You know, so that was in 2000, either late 2009 or 2010. And then I met another vegan not long after in Bournemouth. I went to a folk festival there, crashed at her house, so we talked a bit that night about things. Not in massive detail, but it was like, oh, I've heard this twice now in like the space of 6 months, whatever it was, 6 months or so.
Yeah.
And I think
like exposure to it.
Yeah,
almost.
and I think at the time I was 25, so I think at that age you've kind of grown up a little bit. You've sort of found a place in the world. You've gone through the education system. You've got yourself a job. I was kind of settled, I suppose, to a point. So my mind is perhaps ready to explore things beyond the world that was shown to me, if you know what I mean. Because I think we're born into the world, we accept where we are, and we find our place there. And then you look beyond that. So you're kind of settled to a point, I suppose. Well, I do anyway. You look beyond. So I think I was naturally thinking more. Like the music I was listening to was a lot of 60s music, which obviously mentioned peace, love, anti-war. Lots of these kind of seeds have been planted. And so, I was exposed to this word veganism. finding out what it's about. And I had chats with these two people I'd met. I kept in touch with them by, I think, email then, because I think it was before Facebook, before I was on Facebook regularly anyway, on social media. So eventually I just made the decision. Okay, go vegan. I think I remember I was away in Cornwall. I still do have weeks away in Cornwall, little mini holidays there. I had one by myself, and I don't know, just kind of came back. I was there a week. I think I was there like a week. I came back on my birthday or the day before my birthday. So I think my birthday cake and so on wasn't vegan, but I think I made the thing in my mind, go vegan from this point. Just felt right, felt easy. I did a little bit of research, not much, but I just did a little to know that I could do it overnight and make the substitutes in what I was eating easily enough, without it being a process per se.